So thank you all so much for joining us again, the second Saturday in a row for virtual Les Bleus. This honestly kept me going all week. I don't know about all of you, but this was the hardest week for me. I think it's like quitting smoking. Week 3 is always the worst. So made it through, and now we're here all together. So thank you again so much for joining. And I've now officially started booked people through the end of May. And as Tracy knows, I was speaking to her about possible events in June, and I was like, I can't process June yet, but you know, we'll go through the end of May, and if we're still inside in June, we'll continue. So please, if you're around every Saturday night at 6 p.m. New York time, join us, we'll be here. So we have 5 readers tonight. We'll be doing 5 readers each week because there's obviously less schmoozing time on the internet, so it's easier that way. And the 5 readers are Jamie Brenner, Inua Ellams, Lynda Cohen Loigman, Samir Pandya, and Courtney Maum. So thank you to everyone, all of you readers, and thanks to all of you for joining us. And I'm going to pass it over to Jamie. And as each reader begins to read, I'm going to post in the chat the link to their book through IndieBound that I also sent in the email, because now is obviously the most important time to be supporting our fellow readers and independent bookstores. So please purchase what you can and enjoy Jamie. Over to you, Jamie.
Thanks so much, Paige. This is my first evening with Les Bleus, and it came at the perfect time. I'm a displaced New Yorker. I'm so homesick, I'm so heartsick, and this is my first, believe it or not, my first Zoom event with my book people. I know, I don't know how I've avoided it so far, but it wasn't on purpose. So thank you for having all of us, and I hope everyone is doing okay mentally. I know most book people are considered introverts, so we should be like hardwired for this situation, but I think this is even pushing us past our natural limits. So I'm going to talk, my next book that's coming out May 5th is called Summer Longing, and I publish a sort of a beach book, summer book every spring, summer. And usually this time of year, I'm gearing up to go to bookstores all up and down the East Coast, and now I will not be, so I'm excited to talk about it. This is my first day talking about this book, so I'm kind of feeling my way through it. My original intention in writing a book every summer was to sort of explore a different beach town every year. But I happened to fall in love with one town in particular very early on, and that town is Provincetown, Massachusetts. And for anyone who has not been there or isn't familiar with it, Provincetown is at the very tip of Cape Cod, and it's one of the country's oldest arts colonies. Like, some of our greatest writers and visual artists have made their way from Provincetown. Jack Kerouac, Eugene O'Neill, Tennessee Williams, Jackson Pollock, Michael Cunningham famously has lived there. And Michael Cunningham said of Provincetown that it's an eccentric sanctuary. And he said it's one of the few places he knows of that actually prefers peculiarity. And that in itself really makes it the perfect setting for a novel, because I like to take an ordinary family and put them someplace where all of their sort of secrets and quirks and issues can rise to the surface. And that's what I did with Summer Longing. I'd wanted to explore the topic of motherhood for a long time, but my experience with motherhood has always been fraught. And when my first daughter was born, she had a heart condition. And my own mother was super unhelpful. Like, she was just maximum selfish and made it all about her. And it was just very typical. But then she turned around and decided, even though she was completely removed from me, I'm going to volunteer at this hospital and help other women with their babies. Which I was like, what? Like, you have your own granddaughter that you're totally ignoring. So I always had this idea in my head to explore motherhood and second chances and how we show love and family. So Summer Longing is the story of a retired businesswoman who arrives in Provincetown to start her sort of second chapter in life, like her me time, her carefree time. And no sooner does she arrive at her idyllic rental than she discovers an abandoned baby. And the mystery of this baby and who the parents are and why sort of brings out her repressed or lost mothering instincts and brings her into the drama of the town. So I'm going to read a little bit about this woman arriving in Provincetown for what she thinks will be a carefree summer. She hadn't been on a summer vacation in 30 years, although if she really thought about it, a trip didn't count as a vacation if you weren't coming back. Either way, there would be no more meetings, no more deadlines, no more fires to put out. Ruth was free. She was also anxious. The ferry ride from Boston to Cape Cod was choppier than she'd anticipated. Ruth had planned to pass the hour-and-a-half journey on the upper deck out in the fresh air. She'd lasted 5 minutes. The sun was strong and the speed of the ferry created a lot of wind, and well, she wasn't used to traveling by boat. For the past few months, she'd been driving back and forth from Philadelphia while she searched for her summer rental. But now, with everything either packed up and sent to town or already in storage, she didn't need her car. She wanted to experience the journey to Provincetown like a native, by water. She'd told only a few friends about her decision to sell her business and her house and retire in Provincetown. Her announcement was met with, "Isn't there a closer beach?" and, "But the winters." To the latter, she replied, "But the summers." Really though, why should she have to explain herself at all? Ruth sensed the ferry was approaching Cape Cod before the shore became visible. The line for the snack bar disappeared, laptops closed, suitcases were retrieved from the metal racks. She checked the time. Within the hour, she would walk in the front door of the most perfect beach cottage and her new life would begin. She closed the novel she'd been reading and peered out the water-streaked window of the cabin. The Pilgrim Monument, a 250-foot tower in the center of Provincetown, came into view. The sight of it made her feel almost giddy, like a teenager. This was what she could not fully convey to her friends. The feeling she got in Provincetown was not definable by geography or weather or logic. It was like falling in love. Next to her, a couple strapped their baby into a stroller. The baby fussed and fussed. Rattles and pacifiers were produced to no avail. Oh, Ruth was so happy that high-maintenance phase of life was behind her. Ahead, she could vaguely make out the small shops lining with Mill and Wharf, and in the distance, the steeple of the library. To her right, the long breakwater was covered end to end with double-crested cormorants, standing with their wings spread to dry. Yes, she knew the name of the blackbirds now. She learned something new every time she visited. Unlike so many small towns, closed and unknowable, Provincetown was a place that offered itself to you, unfurling like a beach blanket shaken out in the sun. So then she arrives and she gets to her perfect rental beach cottage. She had hoped when she originally set her plan in motion that by the time she had her Philadelphia life packed up, she'd have a permanent new home in Provincetown. But finding a house for sale on the peninsula, just 3 miles long and 2 streets wide, had proved a challenge. "Your best bet is to be patient and rent," said Clifford Henry, the real estate agent. Patience was a skill that Ruth, at age 58, had yet to master. She was a firm believer in the full speed ahead approach. That's how she'd met all of life's challenges, and for the most part, it had paid off. But for now, Provincetown was forcing her to slow down. She would rent for the summer while looking for a forever home, although it was difficult to imagine finding anything as perfect as Shellhaven. "I'll take it," she told Clifford Henry the day he gave her a tour of the rental property. "And for the record, this is exactly the type of house I'm looking to buy. You and everyone else, sweetheart," he replied. One of the owners of the house, Fern Douglas, had told her she'd leave the keys in the mailbox. This seemed to Ruth an odd and not entirely safe system, but she realized she needed to learn to let go and just roll with things a little more. What was the point of moving to a place like Provincetown if she couldn't relax there? The narrow black metal mailbox was affixed to the side of the house. Ruth rested her bag on a bench and reached inside. Her hand met only empty space. She bent down and peered inside. No key. "You've got to be kidding me." Suddenly exhausted, she walked up to the front door to see if Fern had simply left the door unlocked. No. Ruth rang the bell. Had she somehow mixed things up? Of course not. She was right on time, on the date that agreed she would move in. She rummaged through her bag, dug out her phone, and dialed Fern Douglas. The call went straight to voicemail. So unprofessional. She hesitated only a few seconds before knocking on the door frame. The door behind the screen cracked open. Ms. Cooperman, a woman asked. She was in her late 30s and had green eyes and strawberry blonde hair that skimmed her shoulders. She was not Fern Douglas. Yes, Ruth said, striking a note somewhere between cheery and extremely put out. Is Fern Douglas here? The keys were supposed to be in the mailbox. Yes, apologies. The move-in date has been delayed a night. You have a reservation at the Beach Rose Inn, the woman said. What? I need to speak to Fern. Is she here? No, the woman said. Can you reach her for me or tell me where to find her? No, the woman repeated, but I can give you directions to the inn. So that begins Ruth's journey in Provincetown. It only gets bumpier from there. Summer Longing publishes on May 5th, but you can pre-order it now, maybe from this nice bookstore that's joined us tonight. It's at Chapter One Books? Chapter One Bookstore, maybe. And if you can follow me on Instagram, I'm at Jamie Brenner Writes, and maybe we can reconnect on my journeys this summer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. We'll do, last week we did a big final clap for everybody, so we'll try and do that again. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's really nice to hear, especially since we're all stuck in our houses, write descriptions of new places that we can hopefully journey to soon. So thank you especially for that. Fantastic. Okay, so now we have Inua Ellams. So over to you, Inua.
Hi. I couldn't figure out, I wanted to read from a book I wrote called The Half God of Rainfall, but it's not yet available in the States. So I thought I'd probably not do that. And then I was trying to find something that might be appropriate to the mood of the world, but I haven't written anything because I can't write anything in the midst of all of this. So I'm missing I'm missing the freedom to roam, and the closest large neighborhood to me is called Peckham in South London, and this is something that happened there a while ago. This is a short story written in the ballad form. It's called The Ballad of Abdul Hafiz. And yeah, I'm currently working my way through Breaking Bad, which is also why this might be, the subject matter is at the forefront of my mind. Anyway, so this is it, The Ballad of Abdul Hafiz. Each man holds something deep inside that festers, drives, and dwells. Some drown it out to dull its pain, but in darkness it swells. Some hide it well, it consumes some, but each needs one to tell. I am the one a stranger tells one busy, bright spring day, a thing that seemed to dull the sun, making swans fade away. I'm the one who hears the cause of one such man's dismay. Peckham High Street bus stop churns in the spring morning sun. The gangs of girls all cuss and twirl as rude boys eggs them on. Their laughter seems to swim the air gently like ghosts of swans. I thought those words would form a verse on beauty out of place, for Peckham's known for grit and stone, and swans are known for grace. The bus pulls up, and I sit down to write of swans displaced when a man walks on in old blue jeans and a brown leather coat. Also wearing a baseball cap, he walks and seems to gloat as if the sun shines from his voice. He sings with all his throat. I'd never heard a dude like this who ignores the right notes and loud as if he fears silence, careless as grit and stone, and never seen a prouder man who seemed of Peckham's own. He scans the crowd for someone to call his mate. I glance down, fear I'll be the one, but I glance down too late. The seat beside is filled by him. He makes me agitate. His hands are coarse as concrete walls, his leather coat as base, his pocket cups a can of beer he lifts up to his face and slurps with such a relish that he smacks his lips bold-faced. He smells So bad, I hold my breath and wish for a gas mask. Clearing his throat, he looks at me. Who owns the bus? He asks. I don't know. Can Livingstone? So does Jesus own? He asks. Muhammad owns the bus. He tries, I understand the game. He wants to talk religion, but I don't want the same. So reply, your answer is as good as mine. No claim can be disproved. Muslim? He asks. I have faith, I say. Angry, my verse of graceful swans was now slipping away. You make a point better than all was all he had to say. I peer at him, his dirty face, his kind of lukewarm beer. He takes this for a sign to talk and asks my country, where? I'm Nigerian, I say. How long have you been here? Enough, I say. He laughs out loud, then speaks without a care. I am Abdul Hafiz, he says, born in Algeria. I moved to France in '84 and I come over here, but I don't like it here, he says. No money, too trouble. I want to go somewhere more peace. Weather's not horrible. What's good about London today? He asks, scratching his tubble. I look into the flashing streets, fire stations, burnt buildings, crumbling walls, and oil spills, replying, hey, sun's shining. Yes, you're right, he says. He smiles strangely and returns to drinking. I shrug, look to my book and try to catch the verse of swans. A minute's silence passes where I see some lines take form. Clearing his throat, he kills the swans and asks what I write on. I refuse to speak to him of swans, so question him on place. Where are you going to? To see Solicitor. Why? I ask. After a while, you need one in London. He laughs and says that casually, then smiles his quiet smile. I look at him intently, at the almost black neckline, a dried saliva on his lips, and wish he'd tell me why. But he sits and he sips his beer. I pretend I don't care. Then Abdul clears his throat again, leans forward in his chair and speaks a thing so cold to me, I shiver sitting there. It's said each man holds something deep that festers, drives, and dwells. Some drown it out to dull its pain, but in darkness it swells. Some hide it well, it consumes some, but each needs one to tell. I was the one this stranger told this busy, bright spring day, a thing that seemed to dull the sun and make swans fade away. I was the one to hear the words that held that man's dismay. My son died when he was 15 from rare cancer that kills. I drink so I no think too much, forget how inside feels. I know this is not good reason, but this is the way it is. Abdul Hafiz, speaking those words, sits back, looks to the door. His tongue tunnels and tears my heart. My eyes fall to the floor, flicks to the kind of beer he holds. I wish he had some more. His bus stop comes, he turns to me. It was nice to talk to you. With swan-like grace, reaching the door, he steps on calmly through. I wish I'd spoken words of warmth. My lips were frozen blue. I see him often here and there. His hurt still drives and dwells. I see him drink to dull its pain, but in darkness it swells. He hides it well, but showed it when he needed one to tell. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I have like full goosebumps. I don't know about everybody else. Thank you. That was really amazing.
Can I shill for Inua because he's British, so he doesn't, shill for himself. So I'll use my Americanness. Inua has, when theater becomes a thing again, he has a play. It's at the National Theater, Three Sisters. Is that accurate?
Yes, it finished about a month ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And another play called The Barber Shop Chronicles that was at BAM and also at the National Theater, sold out runs. So back when we come to a point where we have theater again, Inua Ellams, one to watch, two simultaneous badass plays, and they're just like this, and they'll make you feel, they'll make you cry, and you should buy lots of tickets.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks.
And I just put the link through IndieBound to Barbershop Chronicles in the chat. And you know, if you want to add any other link, excuse me, that was the one that I could find on IndieBound, so I wanted to use that one.
I'll throw things there. Don't worry. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Inua.
Thanks.
All right, so now we have Lynda Cohen Loigman. So I'm going to send it over to you, Lynda.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Paige, for inviting me. It's very hard to follow you, Inua. That was beautiful. And I found, I don't know about all of you, but I found it's really difficult to read now, even though it's my favorite thing to do. It's been hard to write and it's been hard to read. And the one thing that I feel like I can read is poetry. So I just loved listening to you speak and read your work.
Thank you.
I'm going to read from my second book. I've only had two, so it's my second. It's called The Wartime Sisters, and it just came out in paperback in March. The hardcover came out last year. My mom grew up in Brooklyn, and my first book was called The Two-Family House. It was inspired by all the stories she used to tell me when I was a child about growing up in a two-family house and living upstairs from her cousins. And when she was 18 years old, she moved to Springfield, Massachusetts. And this second book is sort of about sisters in transition, sisters who moved from Brooklyn to Springfield. It's called The Wartime Sisters. It's set during World War II, but it's really a home front story. And it's really more about the war between the two sisters than any other war that's going on. One of the things that I wanted to sort of explore when I was writing this book was childhood roles that were sort of assigned when we're young. So I think all of us within our families kind of get put into these positions or these roles. You could be the klutzy one, you could be the anxious one, you could be the annoying one, you could be the irresponsible one. And even though as we become adults or we grow older, we don't fit into those roles anymore, often the people in our families still think of us that way. So this book, I tried to sort of explore that and how these two sisters are stuck in the roles that their family has always placed them in. I'm going to read a part from the book where one of the sisters is getting married. Their names are Ruth and Millie, and Ruth is sort of that older, more responsible, rule-following sister. And Millie is the younger one. So she's allowed to be frivolous. She's allowed to be more emotional. She's beautiful. And their mother and father both really kind of get in the way of their relationship. And I'm always fascinated by that, by how parents kind of infiltrate the sibling relationship, even when they don't mean to, and how they kind of just have this impact on how siblings see each other and how they relate to each other. So I'm going to read a part from before Ruth is getting married. She's marrying this scientist who her mother thinks is sort of fat and dull and too sciencey and not at all glamorous in any way. And she is about to give her sort of a present before her wedding. A week before the wedding, Ruth's mother took out her jewelry box. She set the worn wooden case on the kitchen table and motioned for Ruth to sit down beside her. Inside the case was a collection of familiar gold and silver pieces. By most people's standards, they ranged from worthless to modest, but when Ruth had been young, she thought each one was priceless. Her mother rummaged through the contents and handed Ruth a pair of clip-on earrings, 2 golden flowers with tiny garnet centers. "These are yours now," her mother said. "You're something old for the wedding." Ruth had seen the earrings on her mother 100 times. She wore them for every holiday, for every shiva call and funeral. "You should always wear a nice piece of jewelry to the cemetery," her mother liked to say, "so everyone should know you're not dead yet." Ruth fastened the flowers to her ears and kissed her mother's cheek. "You don't have to give them to me, Mama. They can be something borrowed. You can loan them to me." "What are you saying, that I can't give my daughter a gift? Besides, I always meant for you to have these earrings. We'll get them polished tomorrow and they'll look as good as new. I'll take my brooch in too. You know, the one with the pearls. Now, where did I put it?" She picked her way slowly through the small mound of trinkets, but she couldn't seem to find the item she was seeking. "It's always the same," she huffed. "If I'm looking for something, it doesn't want to be found." Let me try, Ruth suggested, pulling the jewelry box toward her. She untangled the necklaces, pulled out the bracelets, and removed all the earrings until she reached the bottom layer. Here it is, she said finally, handing her mother the pin, a simple golden circle surrounded by pearls the size of apple seeds. But before putting the other pieces back inside the box, Ruth spotted a black velvet pouch tucked into the corner. Made of the same fabric as the box's interior, it was easy to miss. Ruth turned the pouch over onto her open palm. The ring that fell out was one she'd never seen before. Thick, polished platinum with a center opal surrounded by diamonds. Ruth stared at the ring for a long time before she spoke. It was obviously valuable, worth far more than the rest of the jewelry combined. Where did this come from? I never told you about that ring. It was my grandmother Fanny's from her first husband in Russia. He was a jeweler, much, much older than she was. 2 days after the wedding, his favorite horse keeled over in the middle of the street, and a week after that, he dropped dead himself. The jeweler's family told everyone that Fanny was cursed. All the bad luck was her fault, they said. Well, Fanny was no fool. She knew she had no future in that verstinkener town, so she booked her passage on a ship to New York the very next day. She sewed her husband's watch into her coat pocket and that ring into her brassiere. She didn't tell anyone in New York that she had been married before. My grandfather didn't even know until my mother was born. And she kept the ring all that time? Ruth's mother shrugged. She told my mother the ring reminded her to be strong. She came here all alone, and she built a whole new life. It's beautiful, Ruth said, holding it up to the light. Why don't you ever wear it? She set the ring down on the table, but her eyes lingered on the stone. Her mother laughed. Me? Where would I wear something so fancy? No, your sister is the one who will need that ring. After she gets married, there will be dinners and parties. Ruth sucked in her breath. The clips from the earrings dug into her lobes, and the pain radiated outward until her whole head throbbed. You've been saving it for Millie, then. Why am I not surprised? Oh, Ruthie, her mother frowned. Don't get all worked up. You get the earrings and Millie gets the ring, so what's so terrible? Ruth unclipped the flowers from her ears and placed them next to the ring. Beside the magnificent opal and the glittering diamonds, the garnet specks and scuffed petals were lifeless and dull. Her disappointment gave way to despair. Ruth rubbed her ears. She could feel the dents in her skin from where the posts from the earrings had pinched them too tightly. Ruth, her mother pleaded, don't take them off, please. They look perfect on you. Keep them on for a while. But Ruth stood from her chair and left the earrings where they were. No, thank you, Mama, she answered. They're uncomfortable. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lynda.
Thank you.
I love hearing stories about old family jewelry and
It's always a fun thing.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, I think that my sister's on here right now, so she'll know that, you know, thinking about our grandmother's jewelry and even like costume jewelry from our aunts when we were young, you know, just like.
People get very attached, I think.
Yeah.
People get a little too attached sometimes, so.
Absolutely. And I am going to share the link to your book in the chat there. Okay. Thank you so much, Lynda. Really appreciate it. Okay, so now we have Samir Pandya.
Hey, sorry. The sound is good?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Hey, thank you all. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to read an early section from a novel that I have coming out called, I don't know if you can see it, it's called Members Only. It was originally supposed to be out on May 12th, but now it's going to come out on July 7th. It's an early scene, and the only thing I'll set up, the narrator is an Indian guy sitting on a membership committee for a tennis club, desperately wanting it to be a little bit more diverse than it is. Okay, so that's kind of all that I will say about it. And Suzanne, who's one of the characters, is kind of the chair of this committee. Here they are, Suzanne said. Two couples walked into the clubhouse. The blacks, of course, were white, but the browns were black. I looked at the handsome couple and breathed a sigh of relief. It was as if an alternate, younger version of the Obamas had just walked in. I glanced at the rest of the committee, all of them looking at the alt-Obamas with big, friendly grins. The room was completely silent. We could hear the circadian murmur of kids finishing up at the pool outside. "Let me introduce you to Doctors Bill and Valerie Brown," Mark said. Bill was roughly 6 feet tall and fit. He was wearing lean, perfectly fitting khakis, loafers, a button-down light pink shirt, and a navy blue wool blazer. I had recently read an article somewhere about how every man needed a perfect navy blue blazer. Bill's was certainly that. On one of his wrists was a bracelet of Tibetan prayer beads, and on the other, a blue-faced octagonal udmars. I placed my hand on my stomach and sucked it in a bit. I wish I went to the gym more often, got my shirts pressed more regularly. Valerie was a tall, striking woman who stood comfortably on her own, close enough to be intimate with her husband, but not subsumed by him. The Browns' sponsors were Mark Black, a well-regarded cardiologist in town, and his wife, Jan. Mark had the confidence that comes with being able to slice open chests. I didn't see him on the courts often, but when I did, his strokes were compact and tidy, his body always moving instinctively in the right direction. He struck me as a little uptight, always appropriately dressed for whatever occasion he was attending. I don't think I'd ever seen his toes, which was noteworthy given the fact that one of the only things we had in common was access to the same pool. Jan was pretty and put together, her prettiness perhaps enhanced by all the time and money she had to take care of herself. They were a family obsessed with being on the cutting edge of trends. They bought their Range Rovers, his in black, hers in white, while most people were stuck in their Audis. Jan took the family to spend a year in Spain so their kids could get used to playing on real red clay before everyone was taking a year off and calling it a sabbatical. Once I overheard Mark say that his shoulders were sore because he'd been skeet shooting the day before. I genuinely thought he was kidding until I realized he wasn't. Who goes skeet shooting? Perhaps everyone soon enough if the blacks continue to have their fingers on the upper middle class pulse. The Browns went around the room, shaking hands with all of the committee members. When they came to me, they lingered for a few extra seconds, their eyes asking for help managing what was clearly an awkward situation. A room full of white people deciding whether they wanted to let a black couple into their club. "I'm here for you," I tried to say as I reached out my hand to shake theirs. "Rajesh Bhatt. Everyone calls me Raj." "I knew a Raj in college," Bill said, smiling. I think everyone knew a Raj in college, except of course a woman from earlier in the evening. Bill had a deep, calming voice, one you might hear on a TV commercial for a Mercedes sedan. I think he runs Google now, or something. "I use Google," I said, returning his smile. "Can we get you anything?" Suzanne asked. "Water would be great," Bill said. I happened to be the one closest to the table with the drinks. Suzanne glanced at me for the slightest beat of a second. I looked at her as Bill looked at me. "You know, how about a sip of something stronger instead?" Bill said, moving toward the table. "I'll get it." I stepped over to the table with him. "What do you like?" he asked, examining the open bottles of white and red. I sensed that he knew his way around labels. I reached for a lone half-full bottle of nearly translucent Pinot tucked behind the mineral waters. "This is the high-end stuff." Bill took 2 clear plastic cups from a stack. I gave us both a liberal pour. Bill took a small sip and then turned to me and said, "Certainly is." Our backs were turned to the rest of the group. Bill ate a dried apricot. I had a piece of salami, and we both took another sip. Before placing the bottle back, I poured us a little more of the wine. Shall we? I asked. Bill took his wine in one hand and a bottle of water in the other. He handed the water to his wife and took a seat next to her. I sat down on the couch facing them. For a moment, I wondered whether Bill was originally from the Caribbean. If he was, he would have grown up with Indians. Maybe he had a grandfather who had arrived on the island as an indentured servant, worked through his contract, and decided to stay instead of going back to the small Indian village he barely remembered. Maybe somehow, over the years, the butt had changed to brown. If that was the case, I mused, going back several generations, Bill and I could well be cousins. Since Eva and I had joined the TC, I'd slowly learned the rules of places like this, what games to join, when to engage in conversation, when to say nothing, never to ask what someone did for a living. I'd made plenty of tennis friends, but I hadn't met anyone with whom I felt simpatico. I wanted Bill to be that guy. He and I were different kinds of doctors, but certainly he'd have some appreciation for my doctorate, in contrast to most of the rich knuckleheads I met here, who probably thought of Indiana Jones when I said I taught cultural anthropology at the university in town. I'd not been getting many invitations to matches lately. I couldn't understand why. My game had continued to improve. I'd begun to wonder if they'd finally realized that I didn't fully fit in, that when they talked about the vacations they were going on to Marrakesh or Fiji, I usually pretended to be adjusting the strings of my racket. But maybe Bill and I could play. We've read all these wonderful letters of support you have, Suzanne said, holding up their file. You're so new to the area, and yet you've obviously made a lot of friends and set your roots quickly. Why don't you tell us about yourselves, your family, and your interest in tennis? I'd read the file, which had letters from the Blacks and several other members attesting to how wonderful the Browns were. As I was reading the letters, I could sense something different about them, but I couldn't pinpoint it. Now I knew that they were a master class in colorblindness. The Browns were friendly and laid back. The phrase, "they'll fit right in," had been used in 3 different letters. Where shall we start? Valerie asked. Wherever you like, Suzanne said. Bill and I met in medical school in San Francisco. We went to Boston to do our residencies. Bill in cardiology, me in trauma surgery. We both grew up in Los Angeles, just a few miles apart, but we never knew each other. I wanted to know which part of LA they'd grown up in, but I didn't ask. Inglewood, always up to no good. Perhaps Baldwin Hills. After winters and residencies that lasted for too long, we realized we missed the sun, the oak trees, and the huge congested freeways, Valerie continued. And so when the opportunity opened up at the hospital, we jumped at it. We're less than 2 hours from our families in LA, and the community has been very welcoming to us. Our sons are also showing some interest in tennis, and Mark can't say enough about how much he loves this place. So it seemed like the right fit for us. As she spoke, Valerie made careful eye contact with everyone in the room. She knew exactly how to make a room full of strangers feel comfortable as they gawked at her, trying to piece together her beauty, all her fancy degrees, the fact that every day when she went to work, she kept death at bay. How old are your sons? I asked. 8 and 5, Valerie said. Perfect, I thought. They'll be fast friends with my own. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samir. I'm so excited for that book. I think, Marcy, are you still on here? Marcy's read it and she said that it's just fantastic. Oh, there you are. I see you, Marcy. And so thank you, Samir. I'm going to put the pre-order link right in here. Thank you. And I love how people are commenting on different lines that really speak to them during the readings. I think that's really amazing. Keep doing that. Thank you. And so thank you, Samir, so much. And now we have direct from Jalisco, Courtney Maum.
Hola.
Hola.
Hi, everyone. Is it okay? Can you hear me if I keep these things on?
I can perfectly. Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah.
We're having a bit of a windstorm. It's not a nice, a little bit. Oh, is it freezing now? Okay. Am I back?
Oh, now you're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have like, at the end of the day is here, these huge windstorms, so we'll just go with it, right? It's a little frightening, but I would like to shill for the book that brought me here to Mexico. It's called COSTALEGRE. Weirdly, it's about a group of artists who are in isolation, waiting out World War II. They've been brought to a crumbling resort in Mexico by Peggy Guggenheim. But since I've been living in it for 6 weeks, I'm not gonna read from it tonight. I'm gonna read from a book I don't have with me called Before and After the Book Deal, A Writer's Guide to Finishing, Publishing, Promoting, and Surviving Your First Book, which came out about a month before everything changed, let's say. And there's a chapter that felt sort of timely, right? So I'm gonna read it. Hopefully we don't freeze up. I'm really grateful to be here with all of you and to hear this. It's just great. I haven't been doing a lot of these, and I'm really grateful to be here. So this chapter is called When Trump Happens to You. No matter how much forethought your editorial team puts into your book's release date, even powerful publishers can't control what Mother Nature and/or shameless dictators do, or a pandemic, the week your book comes out. Superstorms wreak havoc on book distribution. Beloved bookstores flood or go out of business. Bomb cyclones see launch parties canceled. Hopeful galleys end up in a snow melt on an influential author's stoop, costing an unlucky newbie a blurb. It turns out that snow, rain, heat, and gloom of night can, in fact, stay your book from slaying. So can botched presidential elections. So can death. In 2001, author Mike Magnuson's editor at HarperCollins passed away unexpectedly just when Mike was in the heat of pre-publication for his buzzy humor book, Lummox, The Evolution of Man. Mike had been close with his editor, and the sudden loss was devastating. But Mike had a string of fall appearances booked on influential television shows like Today's Show and The Man Show, and he felt like the best way to honor his late editor was to keep the momentum up. The editor's funeral was on September 10th, 2001. Funerals are never a happy occasion, but on September 11th, this particular loss was compounded by a national tragedy. Needless to say, none of Mike's shows ever taped, and when Lummox finally published, Mike's lighthearted tale of a 20-something man-boy slacking around Wisconsin failed to resonate with a nation roiled in grief. Similarly, all signs pointed to go for author Dee Foy's second novel, Patricide, which had started to garner attention far beyond what its independent publisher, Stalking Horse Press, had anticipated for its October 2016 launch. It was released to pretty snappy fanfare, Dee remembers of the novel's publication. In some parts of the lit world, it was even considered a most anticipated book. On publication, it began to receive shiny reviews. Things were going as well as I could have hoped for. I began almost to have expectations. Ha ha ha. On November 8th, 2016, the buzz abruptly stopped. For authors like Dee, in the middle of a book's promotion, the news of Trump's victory felt like a cosmic hoax, this is his quote, had been executed on the world at large, one to which not a single person could reconcile themselves. Reviews that had been promised never came to fruition. Raise your hand if that's happening to you. Interview opportunities fell through giant cracks. From November 9th up into January 2017, I heard not a peep about my book, Dee says. While I could have taken this personally, I didn't, if simply because what had happened was happening to just about every work of fiction and nonfiction published at that time. The only books I knew that folks were reading were Brave New World and 1984. For authors who have the misfortune to publish during a presidency that facilitates an anti-intellectual atmosphere hostile to both writers and the reading public, relying on and collaborating with your literary community can be an emotional salve. Author Tobias Carroll was booked for a slew of group readings to promote his novel Rio and short story collection Transitory the weeks following Trump's contested election. Happily, Tobias was able to find mental strength in numbers. There was a pretty amazing large crowd for one of our events, which I wasn't expecting, Tobias says. I think it was comprised partially of people who were curious about or familiar with our work, partially of locals who wanted to support art in their community, and partially people looking for art as a catharsis, as a response to the events of the previous week. So that was refreshing. It felt like a community in the way that not all readings do. It's not a good look to bemoan the way a national disaster or international pandemic hijacked your book sales, especially when the emergency cost other people, their loved ones, their homes, their sense of safety, their own lives. This being said, books take a lot of time to write. Accepted, couldn't control. Regardless of what threw your launch off course, you'll feel infinitely better and more empowered, focusing on the positive things that could still come to pass for your book, rather than the sea of missed opportunities behind you. You can pitch yourself in simpatico writers for festivals. I wrote this a while ago. There aren't festivals right now, but there's virtual festivals, conferences, and lecture series, like tonight, or try to hire a speaking agent to do this if you have an elevated platform. You can send the book to influential readers who might connect to your book's message. You can start a literary support group with other authors who got screwed by timing. My second novel came out during the first summer of Trump's presidency when people were still glued to the news cycle. And my agent liked to joke about renting a Winnebago for all the other women novelists whose summer books had suffered with a big mural painted on its side that said, "America, are you reading yet?" You can fight to get your book to readers by remaining active in the literary community and continuing to publish online and in print. You can also resist by writing a new book. Don't forget that sometimes it's an author's third or fourth book that brings readers to their first. It's worth mentioning that books can still flourish despite and sometimes thanks to turbulent times. Carmen Maria Machado's award-winning debut collection of queer stories, Her Body and Other Parties, took off like wildfire in 2017 and kept burning through 2018, despite the veritable shitstorm that the news cycle was raining around the world. Rebecca Traister's Good and Mad, The Revolutionary Power of Women's Anger, and Soraya Chemaly's Rage Becomes Her, both launched in the fall of 2018 when the Kavanaugh hearings saw women across America looking for empowering ways to brandish their rage. When good books gain momentum because of negative events, authors get apprehensive about their right to share book news. Obviously, you want to be attuned to the cultural and political environment that your book is coming out in, but you don't have to choose between being politically correct and being a writer. A quote, "Art is a way of engaging with the world," says writer and disability activist Emma Smith Stevens. It produces heightened empathy and even motivation to reflect inward and promotes a sense of human connection that compels us to act. Nothing related to spreading the word about creative work is beside the point. A little chapter, crossing fingers for all of us. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Courtney. Oh, did we lose you? Oh, no, you're still there. Thank you so much, Courtney. That's so timely and amazing. And you know, I'll have to double check, but I'm pretty sure that Dee and Tobias read at the same Les Bleus together the week after the election.
Oh, no
I
kidding.
remember that one so vividly because there were so many people there. I think I actually talked about it last week. There were so many people who came, and it was because, you know, we all needed something to grasp onto.
Oh, incredible.
I know for sure Tobias read at that one. I have to double check, but I think he
it was the same time. It would have made sense.
Yeah, Dee's read, both Dee and Tobias have read at Les Bleus twice each, but I think they did read together at that one.
That's beautiful.
And a few people on this call were definitely at that one. So I'll have to see. That was a great reminder. Thank you so much. And did you want to tell us about your newsletter?
If anybody, I have this newsletter called Get Published, Stay Published, and it's based off of information and before and after the book deal. It's free. I don't plan it ahead of time. I'm kind of writing to respond to things. So it's just like writing advice with totally limited attention span, or movies to watch to minds, movies that are so difficult that you either turn them off and give up, or enter their world. It's just stuff in my heart. Yeah, so if anyone wants to, yeah.
If you're in Mexico, right?
Yeah.
If anyone's in New York, they're doing the applause for the healthcare workers now out the window.
Ah.
And it's really beautiful. Just sorry to interrupt, just because
No, of course. Much more important.
I don't know if you can hear. No, it's all important. This living right now is important, but I just thought.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we
That's
can hear.
great. Do they do it every night at 7?
Every night 7, yeah.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. That's great.
Courtney, can you share the link for your newsletter in the
Yes.
Sorry,
chat?
I'll do it right now.
So that's why.
No, absolutely.
I put the link for the book you just read from Indie Bound in here too.
Thank you.
Okay, so now I guess perfectly in time with the healthcare workers. Thank you. We should have a round of applause for everyone who read tonight, as well as for healthcare workers and everybody else who's helping us take this time. Thanks so much to Jamie and Inua and Lynda and Samir, I don't see, there he is, and Courtney. Thank you to all of you.
Well, thank you.
I'm gonna ask one question, because last week a lot of people like posted photos from Zoom, and I didn't know if that was, you know, something that we do, but I guess we do now. So can everyone just wave? A little fun Zoom photo for everybody. Thanks. All right, so thank you all so much for tuning in, and thanks again to Jamie and Inua and Samir and Lynda and Courtney for reading. Please do support all of your writer peers and readers from tonight with the Indie Bound links to support your local community stores, community bookstores, excuse me, as well as Mara has shared her bookstore in Montana. So thank you, Mara. And let me just click through really quickly to tell you where. So we have a bunch of people from New York tonight, Denmark, I see Toronto, I see Berlin, I see London, I see Melbourne, I think Colombia, is that where Julie is? Yeah, so people from all over. So thank you all for spending this hour with us tonight, and hope to see you next week.
Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thank you, Paige.
Everybody.
Paige, thank you.
Yeah, we really miss you all. We really do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night, everybody.
Organizing.
Ciao, ciao.